Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Radnor Memorial Library. My name is Pam Sidor, and thank you for joining us this evening. Our evening event is an evening with Richard Lyntton. Richard is the author of a brand new book, North Korea Deception.
Yay.
It's the first in the Deception series, and I'm sure tonight Richard will be talking a little bit about his forthcoming books. But let me tell you a little bit about Richard. And my name is Pam Sidor. And again, I thank you all for coming. I know it's nice outside, and I appreciate everyone joining us this evening. Main Point Books is our partner. And if you'd like to purchase a copy of Richard's book, you can always visit Main Point Books in downtown Wayne, Pennsylvania. Richard Lyntton served as a captain and tank commander in the British Army in the First Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm. In this book, Jack Steele, an ambitious British journalist, becomes embroiled in a secret international military and political conspiracy. A little bit about Richard. Richard is a professional film and television actor, and he is the host of a new show on mainline television. Richard will tell you about that. And when he's not writing, he's doing an awful lot of other things. I'd like you to know that Richard lives in the Philadelphia area with his wife, interior designer Michelle Wenitsky, and their two sons. So welcome, Richard. Thank you so much for coming. And I want to ask you, I'm not too familiar with interviewing authors.
You, cocktails are coming
okay.
in each direction.
Okay, and I have very few questions this evening. I loved the book. I listened and read it. I wanted to, because you're an actor, I thought, let me check into the Audible. And that was so atmospheric is the only word, where I heard you speaking Russian and I felt totally immersed in that snowy scene. So that's my perspective, that I really enjoyed listening to Richard speak Russian and his Russian accent, and it goes beyond that.
How was the American accent? Be honest.
Good, very good. Yeah, very good.
Okay, possible.
I thought it was wonderful. And there, yes, right. Well, we won't have any spoilers tonight.
Okay.
But let me ask you, and this is the first thing I thought.
Are we starting? Yes. Is the question that? Okay.
Yeah, this is a question from me. I think I'll only have two. Okay. And then I'm just going to throw you to the wolves.
I've done interviews, but I think this is my first Zoom interview in real time with real people. So
yes, thanks. I'm going to throw you to the wolves. Say that in Russian. Okay. When I saw your book, what came into my mind was this. This is a man that wrote a book. He published it in the middle of a pandemic. And what I wanted to know was, how were you able to write this book, especially since the title is North Korea Deception? North Korea, in my mind, from what I've read, from what we all know, is the most isolated country in the world. How does an author begin to write a book about the most isolated country in the world?
That's a great question. Yeah, so I mean, literally, I guess you could say the seed began back in 1988, 87, 88. I was a student in Moscow in the Reagan-Gorbachev era. The Berlin Wall was coming down. I was at an institute called the Moscow Institute of Foreign Languages, Institut Иностранных языков имени Maris Teresa. It was literally the institute where KGB spies went to learn a language. And there was about 10 of us foreign students from the UK. And at Christmas time, it was a 10-month thing. And at Christmas time, we either went home back to England, or we stayed and we were to go on a trip Now, normally the trips were like, 2 or 3 hours, maybe to St. Petersburg or down to Odessa. But I decided that we should go to Vladivostok, because Vladivostok was 6 time zones away on the other side of Russia. And I just had always wanted to go on the Trans-Siberian Express. So I just make sure my phone is off. Sorry. So I asked our minder, our KGB minder, could we please go to Vladivostok? And he was like, and he would sit in this little office. Literally, all there was in the office was a little phone, and nothing else. Because really, he was like a KGB guy, and he didn't have any actual work to do. So if you wanted to see him, you would go at a certain time, and I would knock on the door. And I remember to this day, actually, it was one of those cushion doors that you can't really knock on, and then you had to find the wooden piece. I remember this stuff like it was yesterday. But anyway, so I said, Sasha, we've got to go to, come on, can we please go to Vladivostok? And he said, Richard, 6 days on train. And I said, yeah, it'd be great, it'd be fantastic. And he said, no, you're crazy. And so I literally had to like badger him 3 or 4 times. I had to come with a group of students, us English students, about 10 of us who wanted to go. I said, look, here's the guys. They want to go. They all want to go. We did it. We went on this train. The 2 KGB miners literally had a little bag full of vodka. That's all they bought. They bought like a little overnight bag, and then the other bag had like 6 or 10 bottles of vodka for a 5-day trip. And it was in winter, so basically the whole of the Soviet Union through 6 time zones looked like the same thing, really. But it didn't matter, because it was just this extraordinary experience. And if you read the book, you'll see that a lot of that experience on the train comes up in the beginning of the book during a sort of chase sequence. And I sort of remember these details, like on when you walk through from compartment to compartment, there was this sort of, these ice globules had formed because it was freezing between the compartments. There was no heat there, obviously, because you're walking through. But I just remember these smooth sort of globules of ice, and it just, all these little details stuck with me all these years. And so when we got there, getting around to answering your question. So when we got to Khabarovsk, we couldn't go to Vladivostok because that was a closed city. So that meant no foreigners were allowed there. So the next best place was like 2 hours west, I guess, and that was Khabarovsk. And so we arrived, and there was this beautiful girl there waiting to meet us, who was dressed in a mink fur hat and a mink coat. Her name was Yulia. She's still alive. I sent her the book recently, because basically one of the main characters is based on this girl who sort of became a friend over the years. And she was wearing this mink coat and mink fur hat. And then it was snow everywhere and the frozen river. And then I said to her, what are those mountains in the distance? Oh, that's China. So I was like, what? We're that close? China's just over there. And then, of course, North Korea was like about 50 miles to the south. And so I just remember thinking way back then, I got to write a book about this one day. I got to write a story. And so, fast forward 20 odd years, married, actor in Philadelphia, started writing because, in between auditions, you have a lot of time. And I was, of course, fascinated by, the relationship with North Korea goes up and down over the years. Sometimes it's fraught, sometimes it's not. I mean, it's just extraordinary. It's a little bit like the Amish for me, because I found the Amish thing fascinating. The fact that you can go out to Pennsylvania. I took my mom there once, and like it's a different world. Like it's so extraordinary. And I found that same thing on a larger scale in North Korea. So I read, to answer your question, I thought my novel has to start here in this area. This is called the Tumen Triangle, the Tumen region. I started reading up on the area. There was some UN involvement. I tried to do a little bit of redevelopment. So basically, just in case people don't know, the Tumen River is literally a river about 50, 60 miles long. It runs sort of through Russia, North Korea, China, in that area. And I just thought, wow, this is a really interesting area. What if something happened here? Like nothing ever happened there, as far as I know. But what if something did happen here? So I just made up this plot that, the British journalist travels to Vladivostok. He's a journalist, and he becomes embroiled in this secret Western conspiracy to blow up a North Korean nuclear reactor, because it's, you know, the North Korean nuclear reactor is just down the road. And then as for, so I knew Vladivostok, I knew Russia, and, you know, I know most of the cities I tend to write about, but didn't obviously know Pyongyang. So I just read some books. I literally just bought about, I remember I bought about 10 books, in nonfiction books. And I just read them and just picked out little details, you know, Kim Jong-il and Kim Il-sung and North Koreans, and I sort of made it, you know, and I also thought of James Bond movies. I sort of pictured Kim Jong-il as like one of those guys in one of those evil guys in the James Bond movie, and I gave him pink satin slippers and sort of, you know, he has a cat or something in one of the scenes. So, you know, like good old fiction. That's the beauty of fiction. You can just make stuff up.
And so where it might be far-fetched for someone like me, because I've never been there and looked out and seen what you've seen.
Yeah.
So it's not that remote for someone like you, because you traveled in that area, you have your experience with languages, but of course you have to keep well informed about North Korea in order to write plausible.
And I mean, if you see, you know, we all see those pictures, don't we? The big palaces, the big marches, the sort of tanks, the columns of tanks, those ominous looking buildings. And I went to Beijing. In fact, a lot of the inspiration came from a trip to a friend's wedding in Beijing. And this was an army friend actually of mine, and he was in the Welsh Guards, and I was in the Household Cavalry. And at Sandhurst, the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, the sergeant used to joke, because he used to walk down our corridor for inspection, and we were next door to each other, and I had a Russian flag up in my room and he had a Chinese flag up in his room, and because I studied Russian and my friend had studied Chinese, and so the sergeant used to say, "Oh, what we got here? We're in the communist bloc now, are we, gentlemen?" And, you know, as we were sort of standing to attention and saluting, and so all these years later, my friend got married to a Chinese girl. And he is actually running a magazine called That's Shanghai. And in fact, his book is called That's Shanghai, I think. He wrote a book about his experiences. But basically, he was a magazine editor out in Shanghai. So we went to his wedding in this incredible sort of communist enclave sort of slash what do you call it, colony kind of thing for Communist Party members. It's big tall buildings, beautiful buildings, and sort of marbled villas, you know, with marble bathrooms in. And so again, I used some of that, and I thought this is probably how it is a little bit in North Korea. The sort of the party members probably have this kind of lavishness. So it was really a mix of those Chinese details. And we went to the Great Wall of China, and you look and this expanse of mountains, and I just thought, again, this is like a James Bond movie. You know, this is just like incredible. Something has to happen here one day in one of my books. So so I guess it was a mixture.
That kind of leads into people might be curious when they read this book why you do know so much about tanks, and why you can write about this with authority, because you were in the British Army, you were in Desert Storm, and so yes, I would call you an authority. And do you think without that background in the British military, would you have been able to do this?
Right. So no, I mean, I wouldn't. So you know, great point.
Or would you have wanted to, or
so
been inclined?
Cavalry, as people may or may not know, you know, if you're a cavalryman, you know, in the old days, obviously that meant you're on a horse. In my day, you could still be on a horse, because the Household Cavalry, which is part of the Brigade of Guards that protects the Queen, they still do the ceremonial horseback stuff, and they wear uniforms and they ride horses. But you also have to be a tank commander, so tanks and horses go together. So yes, you know, I went to Bovington Camp. It's on the south coast of England. It's called the Royal Armoured Corps, the Royal Armoured Corps Centre. You know, and you have to go and learn how to be a tank commander after Sandhurst if you're going to be an officer in the Household Cavalry. And I was terrible. I mean, you have to understand, going in a tank is like it's such an anathema to anything you've ever done. I mean, you're the commander. You had to learn all the positions. So in a tank, there's the commander's seat, there's a gunner's seat who looks through the sights, and he kind of lasers with a laser beam, and he fires. There's a guy to your left who literally is loading these massive rounds, like they're literally 120 millimeter. When you hear the phrase 120 millimeter round, that means that the diameter is 120 millimeters. And so there's literally a rack of ammunition there, and the guy is shoving it into the breech block of the tank main armament and shutting it. And then the tank commander is saying, right, men 100, 200 meters on, lasing, he's lasing the target. And so it's just a really difficult thing to do, technically. And you have to be, if you're good at computer games, then you might be okay being a tank commander. But if you're not, as I was kind of more artsy, with the foreign languages. Right. So anyway, so it was kind of hard. And then it was even harder because then the next thing, the Gulf War broke out, and I went to Germany, and our commanding officer said, right, we're all going to the Gulf War. And I was like, oh my God, we're actually going to war. And it was really tough. I wasn't expecting that. Most of my friends weren't expecting that. I know people say, well, you join the army, what do you expect? But in those days, you have to understand, being in the army was about adventure training in Bavaria and doing sort of marathons and expeditions. No one really thought back in 1989, right, that you were actually going to go to war. And sure enough, we did. The Gulf War I broke out, and we went off to war. And absolutely, I spent a few weeks training, and then the war itself was literally, I think, about a week or 10 days. It was a very short war, Gulf War I. But anyway, so yes, I definitely know about tanks, and you have to forgive me if you read the second book, Hyde Park Deception, because there's more. There's tank scenes in that too. I just can't help putting them in. I'm sorry.
And before I hand things over to our audience here, our readers, or maybe potential readers, I heard last night you were interviewed on the counterculture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I thought, should I bring up Mr. Chen?
Right.
I wanted to mention Mr. Chen, because
yeah.
I think he's a very important character. He has a presence in your book. Mm-hmm. And I almost think that since I was introduced to Mr. Chen, that I'm having Mr. Chen moments, or it's making me more aware of the synchronicity in life, mm-hmm. and what people might call God winks or something like that. And you know what I'm talking about, because you created mm-hmm. Mr. Chen, and he's a character in your book.
Yeah. So that's interesting that Grover Silcox on PBS 39, also picked up on that. And I was actually, obviously thrilled that he obviously had read the whole book. But if you haven't read the book, that's fine. Anyone listening or anyone watching. And so, my character arrives in the middle of nowhere, and he gets trapped. I won't say any more than that. He's trapped, but he gets rescued by an enigmatic old man called Chen. And basically Chen, literally in the middle of all this mayhem, kind of teaches him to meditate, really. And wonderfully enough, I can see two people on the event that actually have been with me in my meditation class for several years. And so when I came to this country, I started getting into yoga and meditation, and it's a very big part, and it became a very big part of my life. And not to go on and on about it, but basically I've been on silent retreats for 2 or 3 days, where you just literally go and sit in silence, in my organization out in California, in Encinitas. And I think I added Chen after much later on, because after doing all the meditation, because I do a meditation class at Germantown Academy for parents, and for parents on a weekend. And in fact, all through the pandemic, we met every morning at 9 a.m. for literally 100 days straight, starting last February, whenever the pandemic started. So we did a Zoom meditation every morning. That's how important it was or is to me. We do the class once a week now because we're sort of back on track. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, so I wanted to bring, I thought, why not? I'm writing this book, it's up to me. You know, I can do what I want. And so I sort of added that meditation element later on.
And that's part of you, because reading this
Yeah.
book, and now that I know you, and I've known you quite a long time, Richard.
Yeah.
When you think about it, because I
Yeah.
remember you with your young sons. Um, so a lot of you is in North Korea deception.
Mhm.
So of course, Mr. Chen is a part of you too. So I could understand why you'd want to add him
Yeah.
in here. And in contrast to everything else going on with one deception after another, he's he's a nice place to come home to. And I just wanted to give him his due, and just because I had a feeling that's maybe why he was part of this book, because so much of you is part of this book. I would like to invite members here tonight. If you would like to unmute yourself and you can ask Richard a question, I would love that, especially since we have Iris here and Mary Jane and
Ask
Dominique.
me
So,
if you'd like.
so how do you feel? People, if you want to unmute yourself, please do that, and you can chat with Richard.
Hi, I'm Bobette Fisk, and I wanted to ask Richard, what brought you to Philadelphia?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I became an actor in London, and I did this gig in London where I played a German, and it was like one of those live industrial events, and it went really well. And the boss said, "Hey, do you want to go to New Zealand next month?" And I said, sure, you know, paid gig, flying business class all the way to New Zealand. And so the week before, he's called me, said, hey, there's good news and bad news. He said, the New Zealand gig is canceled. I said, okay. He said, but the good news is that if you want to go to Philadelphia, we can go to Philadelphia. And so I said, sure, why not? And literally all I knew was The Cheese, the movie with Tom Hanks. That's literally, I think, all I knew about Philadelphia. And so as an actor, we came here and we stayed at Sheraton, that was the Sheraton Society Hill then. And we basically had like 10 roles, and they flew CGI, that insurance company, CGI. They flew executives in all over the world. And there were about 4 British actors, and we each had like 10 roles each. So we played 10 different characters. And, you know, every night they took us out to these posh restaurants, Budokan and
Oh my gosh.
yeah, what's the famous one? The Italian one just by the river there. All the famous restaurants in Old City every night. And so one night we were out and we went to this little bar called Marmont, who I'm sure some of you will know, on Market Street. And I remember, actually, this is a true story. I remember saying to the universe, I remember saying, can someone please introduce me to a beautiful American girl? You know, I'm kind of a little bit bored. Like I've been here 4 days and nothing's happening. I swear to God, the next 10 minutes later, I looked up and there was my wife, Michelle. And she kind of looked a little bit like Sarah Jessica Parker, because that night she happened to have her hair sort of like a little bit curly, like Sarah Jessica Parker. And so I thought, oh my God, I gotta go and say hi to her. And I think it was just like 2 of us actors left by this stage. You know, everyone, the other 4 and the boss had gone home. So I just went up to Michelle and I just said, hey, hi, you know, my name's Richard. You look like that girl from Sex and the City. And she said, oh, that's my favorite show. and as I tell the story, and the rest they say is history. That's how we met. So it was literally an acting gig, you know, in Philadelphia, which is kind of cool. And then I think she came to London, and we went to a friend's wedding in Prague, and then we came back and we got married about a year later, and I started working and living here and everything.
And GA, I'm a alumna.
Oh, cool.
Of GA. So you give a meditation class.
Yeah. So we
Fabulous.
So we do on a set. Anyone's welcome, GA community. In fact, I think the majority of the students, as it were, are are kind of, you know, alumni rather than current people, because we all know that parents have things to do on a Saturday morning. And so funnily enough, like I think I suddenly realized at one point, you know, most of my folks, as it were, are actually alumni. So yeah, we did it in person. I think we did it for like 5 years. And we do it on a Saturday morning for like 45 minutes. And again, it's just coming back to that idea of, you know, I one of my things, and again, I don't know, you know, how much I'll end up writing about this, but I just believe that the world, as I tell people, the world would be a much better place if everyone could just sit in a room alone and in silence on their own. And so, you know, that's what I believe, like, you know, and so that's we started doing it. So you're welcome to join us anytime. And in fact, I have a Facebook meditation page. I think
Oh, good.
I forget the name of it. It's called I think it's called Richard Lyntton Mindfulness, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I'm looking forward to reading your book.
Oh, well, thank
Terrific.
you. Yeah, but anyone's welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We've kind of, wow, we've done our 30 minutes. We said we're gonna do at least 30 minutes, right?
So right, sure.
But feel free to ask anything else, guys.
Feel free. I think John looks like, and John, are you ready to, the big reader who also read your book? Hi, John.
Yeah, hi, Richard. Pam and I were talking earlier today that your book seems very autobiographical. And after you've talked tonight, it seems even more so. And it seems to me also, Pam, of course, has done a lot of background here and knows a lot of your history. And I guess I'm questioning that. I haven't read your second book, of course, but it seems that dealt with some time you spent in Bosnia. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess that's going to be autobiographical too, to an extent. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, even more so than the first book, to be honest, because even though it's called Hyde Park Deception, that sort of starts in London. It starts on what we call Queen's Lifeguard, the ceremonial unit that people have seen if they've been to London. And so this is 8 years before North Korea Deception. And basically, I wanted to do, you know, London, Bosnia, because I did spend many years in Bosnia, and it was, you know, absolutely sort of fascinating to be in a war zone. I mean, there's so many stories to tell for another time, but you know, when you had 1,500 shells landing a day in Sarajevo when I first got there, and each shell is, you know, obviously capable of killing several people if it hits in the right spot. And basically, in a nutshell, I just wanted to write a story that sort of tried to talk about the sheer chaos and the sheer chaos, not only of the warring factions, Bosnian Muslim, Bosnian Serb, Bosnian Croat. And you got to remember, you know, Marshal Tito had kept all those people together, those ethnic tensions. He kept the lid on that for so many years and done such a great job. But also what fascinated me as a young army officer, as a United Nations military observer, was how sort of wrong the international community seemed to be getting things. You know, like they didn't speak the language. They came in these delegations. They would have these meetings. They didn't speak to people on the ground. They didn't go into these apartments that have been bombed by a tank shell. They didn't see the pain and suffering. And so again, you know, it obviously left a very big indelible mark on me. I remember going to one little house. This was on the Bosnian Serb side, and you know, I'd make friends with people on both sides because I was lucky enough to be able to travel back and forth across the confrontation lines, because I was in a, you know, Blue Beret and UN Jeep. And I remember this lovely girl, pretty girl. She was about 16 and a mother, and I can't remember how I met them, but you know, I would be driving down the road in this little village and I'd sort of stop and see them, and they invited me in for coffee or whatever. And the guy had this big mustache, and he came out of his house. He said, "Hey, Richard, look at this." And he came out with like belts of ammunition slung across his shoulder and like 2 machine guns, one in each hand. I'm like, oh, and he said, "Hey, look, grenade. You know, he had hand grenades." And I said, "How come you got all this stuff?" And he said, because I was, you know, you got to understand, like, I was really naive. I'd done the Gulf War, but that was like a few days in a desert. It wasn't really war, like it was a distant war. So I just remember, and he came out and he was showing me his his hand grenades. And I said, well, you know, why have you got it? He said, oh, I'm fighting, of course. I said, what do you mean you're fighting? He said, yeah, my day off today. And he was literally going back to the front line, to the trench, to literally a trench. And there's a scene near the beginning of the book, you know, set in a trench, which was sort of inspired by this, or me going to the actual trench. And then literally, like I went back like a few weeks later, literally just like maybe 3 or 4 weeks later. And, you know, I said to the girl, I said, the mother, I said, where is he? You know, is Raiko? And they said, he's dead. He's dead. And so, I mean, just like, you know, they were so happy, and it was almost like, you know, going off to the front line to fight. And then of course it's war. So people die in war. So anyway, so yes, you know, the second book is about Bosnia. And, you know, I'm kind of looking forward to the third book because I want to get off to more like exotic locations like Paris and Venice and Capri and places where I enjoy going, and you know, more sort of exciting perhaps for people to read. But again, you know, one of the things that I always tell people is that, because I tried to get, like 10 years ago, I think I tried to, before the whole sort of indie author thing took off, I tried to get an agent, and people say, oh, no one's interested in Bosnia, no one's interested in North Korea, you know, and you know, they were wrong about North Korea. I mean, I've sold a lot of copies of North Korea Deception, and so it's not true that people are not interested, and it's not true that, and I hope and pray that it's not true that, you know, people won't be interested in Bosnia, because it's set in London and Paris and Bosnia. And so, you know, I think I'm not so sure that that's so important anymore. But yeah, so it's definitely, you know, inspired by events, real life events in Bosnia.
How many years after the Gulf War was that?
So that was probably just a couple. So it was Gulf War, and then I think almost the very next few months later. In fact, that was a very quick story, great story. I as you might all imagine, I wasn't like the best army officer that ever lived. Okay, I wasn't really cut out for it. It wasn't really my thing. Being in a big regiment with lots of tanks and lots of guys, you know, it wasn't sort of my thing. I had other avenues to pursue, but I basically, I sort of said, you know, I think I want to leave. I said, you know, I'd done my Gulf War bit. I said, you can't leave. You're signed up for 5 years. And then out of the blue, there came this, I mean, it's just incredible how stuff happens. Out of the blue, there was literally a signal from London that came to the regiment. They said, we're looking for Russian speakers to come and learn Bosnian in London. And my adjutant, who was a captain, he sort of, you know, he hated me so much that he almost wasn't going to put my name in the hat, but he had to, because it was an order. You know, you will give us names of Russian speakers. So they wanted me at this stage. The war had passed by, the Gulf War. We were all going off to Canada on these big exercises that British Army does in British Army training area in Canada. It's like 100 square miles of nothing, and you literally fly out there with your regiment, and you do these exercises in the middle of nowhere. And I really didn't want to do that, because I'd already done it once, and it was freezing cold. It was like -20, you know, in the middle of nowhere. And so even worse, they wanted me to be what they called unit employment officer, which meant I was responsible for the logistics of literally making lists of all the stuff that we had to take from Germany and fly out to Canada. I mean, the most horrendous job in the British Army for an officer, probably. And they gave me that job because they didn't like me particularly. And I remember getting called into the office, and the adjutant was so upset. He said, okay, Dickie. They used to call me Dickie. Okay, Dickie, you're going to London tomorrow. And I said, what? And I was like, what? And you know, secretly inside, I'm like, what? Yes. And they said, yeah, they want Russian speakers to report to the MOD tomorrow. You're flying tomorrow. And so basically they had to pull me from that worst job in the world. I go to London. There were literally only 2 Army, 2 Air Force, 2 Marine officers called in the entire like British forces to go and do this humanitarian aid job in Russia. And within a week, within 10 days, I'd gone back to the regiment. They literally had to hand me $10,000 Deutschmarks in cash for my cash expenses. They were ordered to give me the money. And the whole regiment was so pissed because I was off on this jolly, well, they call it jolly in Russia. It wasn't really jolly. We worked hard, but we were in civilian clothes. All the way, back to London, then back to Russia within about 2 weeks of that call. So I can't remember how I got to that story, but yeah, so that's right. So it was Gulf War, Germany, Russia, and then came the Bosnia bit. So then after that, they said, right, now we want Russian speakers to go to Bosnia. So I didn't even have to go back to the regiment. They wanted Russian speakers to go to London, to the Defense School of Languages just outside London, learn Bosnian. And they said, anyone who's interested? And I said, sure, yeah, I'll go. I didn't want to go back to Germany and sit in a tank park. And so then I spent 6 months in London, just outside London, living at home, but learning the Bosnian language. And so then that took me literally another I had 2 tours in Bosnia. So that finished out my 5 years in the British Army. In a nutshell.
Richard, can I just go back to you? You might have already covered this. This is Babette Fisk again. But just being at Sandhurst was, it's quite an extraordinary, what am I trying to say? It's unique that you were at Sandhurst. I mean, it's just not anyone who can apply and get accepted to Sandhurst. So tell us about that. I mean, you were an officer in training, and it's an extremely established.
Right.
So tell us about that.
So obviously West Point is your equivalent of
yes.
Sandhurst. And in those days, you could apply, you could become what they call a university cadet. So before you went to university, you could say, okay, I want to give the Army 5 years, and in return they'll give me a huge amount of money at university, which they did, and in return I'll serve 5 years in the British Army. And so that's what I did, and I applied to my regiment, the senior regiment. The British Army was formed in 1660. And I like the idea of being a cavalry officer rather than a signals officer. I like the idea of horses and all that kind of stuff. And again, I didn't realize that the Gulf War I would break out. I might not have joined had I known that. But yeah, I mean, Sandhurst was extraordinary. I sort of can't help wishing. I have 2 boys, 18 and 16, and I know one thing I've learned as a parent is that you can't possibly try and put all your things that you think you've learned on your kids, right? They have to learn it themselves. You can tell them stuff, but let's face it, no one ever learns anything from being told, right? You have to experience it. So I sort of wish that kids could go to like a military academy type thing. We did the drill, and I remember the very first day at Sandhurst. Quick funny story. The British Army NCOs are like the funniest in the entire world, and they should all have their own stand-up comedy shows because they're just so funny, and they're beasting you, what they call beasting you, and they're marching you around, and you're wearing these silly outfits like gas masks and funny hat and a raincoat and boots, and you're marching out left, right, about 10, and so it's really quite funny when you sort of look outside. And I remember walking to the shower on the first day, and so I had my green army towel. And the sergeant shouted down the corridor, "Don't kick that towel, there's somebody in it." And so he was sort of implying that I was very thin, because I was, I got to bulk up a bit. But yeah, I mean, and I remember also one other story that springs to mind, and thank you for asking, Babette, because it's like I literally haven't thought about it for 20, 30 years. But
yeah, good question, Babette. Thank you.
Yeah, I also realized very early on that it was a performance. So you go on these exercises and you're putting in an attack against the Gurkhas, because the Gurkha regiment was sort of like the enemy. There was the enemy at Sandhurst. So you have these little detachment of Gurkhas, and you're digging trenches and you're attacking them. And I just remember that all you needed to do to pass Sandhurst was just show such aggression and just outrage and just pure aggression is the word, not violence, but aggression.
Right.
I just remember, so you'd wait, and each person, each platoon, there's 30 members in each platoon, and there are like 4 platoons going through Sandhurst at one go. And so each person in that platoon would have a chance at being the commander for an attack. And I was a pretty good student, so they didn't ask me for ages. 1 week went by, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then finally I was in charge. I was in command. And I just remember thinking, and this is where the kind of the acting came in years later. I just remember thinking, okay, fine, I know what I'm going to do. So we had this line, and we're about to attack, where you get up and you skirmish. And I just remember going basically ape shit. I'm not sure how, we shouldn't really be cursing here, but I was effing and blinding. And I was like, you get the fuck out of it. And I went up to people and I lifted them up with 2 hands, because we were all wearing clothing, and I just threw them. I said, get going. And it was a complete act, I just like put it on. And I just remember at the end, the color sergeant going, well done, sir. Very good, sir. Yeah, very good. And of course, it's totally nothing to do with real life war or like the real thing. But anyway, so that's how I got through Sandhurst. And yeah, that's how I got through Sandhurst. But
Hi, Richard. If you have a minute, I'm Mary Jane. I'm one of the members of Richard's meditation. I don't think I've missed a session.
right.
since
Hi, Mary
since the-
Jane. Thanks for
Hi.
joining us. Thank you
yeah,
so much.
since the pandemic started, I know I didn't miss a session, but I've definitely become a meditator now, and I can drop into it at any moment in my house or wherever now. So thank you for that gift of this past year. But I wanted to ask you, so I read and reviewed Richard's book almost before it came out, or just as it came out, I guess. So it's been a while, but I didn't get to hear any of his author talks, and I'm totally captivated and enjoying it. But I wanted to ask you, you've told us about these other aspects of your life. How and when and why did you get involved in acting, which is a large part of who you are?
Oh, thank you. Wow.
Yes.
But I have to tell everyone, like, it's so, I was telling Pam earlier, it's so funny because, I mean, I spent 15 years on QVC, where I'm selling other people's SHIT, and so it's so funny to be on this call and people actually want to find out stuff about me. Like, such a weird experience and a nice experience. I mean, I won't lie, it's great. So acting, yeah. By the way, can I just say, I'm going to do a quick plug, just because
Yes.
Jane reminded me.
I watched The Equalizer and Redcoats also.
Thank you.
Yes.
No, but what I was going to say is, if there's anyone out there, or in future, because I know that we're recording this, if you've read North Korea Deception, if you would be kind enough to leave a review on Amazon, because I don't know whether people understand how important they are. I think I have like about 80 reviews now, which is phenomenal for like a book that's been out 4 months, but they really, really make a big difference. And literally people in UK, Canada, Australia are literally seeing your reviews. So if you're watching this, please write a review. As far as the acting goes, great question.
Mhm.
How did that come about? Oh yeah, I remember. Okay, so I was out in, that's right. So I left the army, and within like 3 months, I was back in Bosnia. I'd done UNTV. I left the army. I'd done United Nations Television, and we, again, a lot of stories there, sort of filming ethnic cleansing and massacres in Bosnia, crazy stuff. I'm doing a talk on the Imperial War Museum next week about that, because they called me to testify in The Hague, because I'd witnessed and filmed some of these atrocities. But basically what happened was, I then found this movie called Welcome to Sarajevo, and they were going to shoot this movie in Bosnia, and it was with Woody Harrelson and Marisa Tomei, and the director's Michael Winterbottom.
Okay.
And I went to for an interview, and I'd never been in the film business at all, but they loved the fact that I spoke Bosnian, of course. They loved the fact that I knew Sarajevo, because that's where they were filming. The movie's called Welcome to Sarajevo.
Okay.
And I had always liked the idea of acting.
Mhm.
But I wasn't, this was just behind the camera. This was an assistant director, third assistant director. And so we're in Sarajevo and we're filming, and I get to know Marisa Tomei, and I always tell the story how she literally, I would translate for Woody Harrelson in Bosnian restaurants, like I was the interpreter for Woody Harrelson. And then Marisa Tomei literally, my earlier claim to fame was that Marisa Tomei painted my toenails blue with white polka dots. And so she was really sweet. And of course I had a massive crush on her, because, you know, who wouldn't?
Well, she's very lovable. I don't know. She's very charming and lovable. Keep going.
And what's great about her is that I feel like she's not one of these people who, you know, puts herself out there. She doesn't need to, because she's so talented. But, you know, you never see her do interviews, right? You never see her on TV. She just does stuff. I wish I would like to be like her.
Yeah.
Have enough good work. But anyway, so I remember very clearly that we were on some rubble, like a bombed out rubble in Sarajevo, and there was Stephen Delane, who is a famous British actor, the lead, and Woody Harrelson, and they were sitting on this rubble, and the crew was like around, and I was sort of standing off to the side, you know, making sure people didn't walk onto the set. And then suddenly, and they were chatting, Woody and Stephen were like chatting, and then someone, the first AD shouted, "Cut!" I'm like, oh my God, they were just acting. They were literally just doing a scene. And I thought, that is just so cool. That is so incredible. And I decided then and there that when I got back to England, that I would figure out a way to go off to theatre school, drama school. So that's what I want to do. That's just amazing. So basically what I did is I left the army. I actually got some money from the army, because they were cutting, they were doing defense cuts. And I think I volunteered to leave after 5 years as opposed to 8. And so they gave me a chunk of money. And then I used that money to go to theatre school in London. So that's how it happened. And then I think I was probably acting for a couple of years in London, maybe 1 or 2 TV gigs, a thing at Edinburgh Festival, and then the guy who asked me if it, you know, would come out to Philadelphia. So that's how the acting came about.
Richard, it's Iris. Can you hear me?
Hi, Iris.
Hi, Iris.
Hello. I am so impressed by you. We've been together. I've known you for so long.
Yeah.
Stefan slept at my house 3 nights last week. But we've never had this level of conversation. I know Larry knows everything, but I'm just over the moon. I'm definitely going to read your book, and I'm definitely going to leave a review. I just want to get that out there.
Oh, good.
But are you still fluent in Russian and Bosnian?
Yes. Yeah. Funnily enough, Pam was just asking me that today. Do you still remember? But absolutely, yeah. I don't know why I don't seem to forget. I mean, in fact, I've got an audition tomorrow for Wu-Tang as a German. I played a German in Mr. Robot one time, and I do auditions constantly in you know, as a Russian or a French or a German or an English guy. And in fact, I was even a Russian military, a Russian medical interpreter here in Philadelphia. And you know, so yeah, I kept up with my Russian.
How many languages do you speak?
What's that?
How many languages do you speak?
Oh, so it's Russian, German, French, and Bosnian. And I mean, the Bosnian's probably not quite as up to the mark, but if I met someone, I could, you know, dobar dan, kako ste? Yeah, jesmo dobro.
So that's a Slavic language?
Yeah, it's
Bosnian, Slavic language.
It's Latin script, but it is similar to Russian, which is why they asked for Russian speakers to go and do that 6-month course in Bosnian. But yeah, it's still there. It's still there. In fact, I just I just teach you all a quick bit of one word in Russian that I will do my little party trick. So if you repeat after me, it doesn't matter if you're muted or not. I'm going to teach you how to say hello in Russian. So you go with a Russian accent. Does. Your. Us. Fit you. So does your ass fit you? So say does it ass fit you?
What's wrong with us with you?
Right, exactly. But some people don't know that one. It's too difficult.
Okay.
So if
Yeah,
you say,
yes.
Здравствуйте,
Здравствуйте.
that is how to say hello in Russian.
Yeah.
I'll just wave. I'll just wave. You know what I mean?
Anyway, but
One
yeah,
last question, Richard. Do you
yeah.
have any, based on everything we hear and read and see on TV about North Korea, do you have any fear of like any sort of retaliation, like that they
Good question.
watching or reading your reviews or listening to your book, anything?
Oh, I see. Yeah, because I've sort of, well, I did change the names of I didn't use the real president's name.
Right. I know.
But yeah, I think I came to the conclusion after the Sony hack that if they wanted to do something to me, I haven't got a chance in hell of stopping them. So I
Right.
figured, and plus, if I was that famous, then I'd probably be able to sort of compensate it by selling books. But no, I mean, I did think about that, Iris, funny enough. Because I'm sort of, but I'm not because well, I don't want to give the end away, but North Korea is a player in the international scene, so it's not like I'm making them out to be complete like crazies or pariahs, really. But it's a great question. But yeah, so I did think about that, and in fact, out of the blue one day, I got this call or an email from the equivalent of the so the South Korean Voice of America. So in other words, the people here in America who broadcast into North Korea. And she literally did a little interview with me. She said, I'm doing a story on, books being published about North Korea.
Right.
Here.
Right.
And so literally, not only did she write, it's actually on my website, and if you could scroll down the blog section, she literally wrote a little piece. My book covers there. And so I can say that her voice in North Korean, said Richard Lyntton, or however you say it. And that was broadcast inside North Korea as a book being published about North Korea, which is crazy. And that, I think she just Googled, books North Korea, like this was last December. So yeah, so it's kind of it's a great question. But yeah, so nothing crazy has happened. But like I say, I figure if I'm that well known, then I can probably handle it somehow.
Well, congratulations. I'm just delighted for you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Iris. We have a few more minutes. Richard, would you like to tell us about your show? I know I've watched 2 episodes of Author Hour at mainline television. Tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, real quick, guys, because I know it's
something new. Yeah, we have.
But thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's just through Pam and through the guys at mainline TV, they had this idea for a show about writing. In fact, he wanted to do sort of movies. And I said, well, I'm not really sure I'm too good on movies, but I love the idea of asking local authors to come in for 30 minutes and we chat. And so I happen to have a couple of friends who are authors, traditionally published authors and indie authors. And so I have this great gig now where I get to be like a talk show host for 30 minutes. And all you have to do is Google Author Hour with Richard Lyntton on YouTube. There's 2 up there already. The first one we did was with Lee Himes, who's written a fantastic book called The One That Got Away, which is this fantastic sort of sliding doors type story of this middle-class woman who gets to be with the Philadelphia high society. Like her family's change overnight kind of thing. Great book if you haven't read it. It's called The One That Got Away. And again, if I'd moved to, had I known about that book, like everyone who moves to Philadelphia should read that book, because you find out a lot about Philadelphia. And then Jennifer Berman, who's a GA parent, whose husband, incredible story, husband was found guilty of white collar fraud, got sentenced to 13 years in federal prison. She wrote a book about it. So we interviewed her in episode 2, and so definitely check that out. And I'm grateful for the opportunity because it's fun. I mean, I enjoy it. I read the person's book or one of their books, and then you just tape the show, and then it's going to be, I think it's shown on mainline TV about 15 times during the month. But obviously most people aren't going to be able to get mainline TV 21 because it's mainly sort of Radnor and I think Lower Merion, but it's on YouTube. So people
And I do think of it as public service. It's public television. We love public television. It's just a little more local than WHYY or any other market around the country. Very important, actually,
If you have any,
public television.
right. And if you have any ideas for people, by all means, shoot me an email, richard@richardlyntonbooks.com. My website, by the way, is richardlyntonbooks.com. And it's LY for Yankee, N for November, TTON. So it's richardlyntonbooks.com. You can always shoot me an email through that.
Okay. And when can we look forward to Hyde Park?
Hyde Park to say, oh, you know what I should have done? I should have had the cover ready for you guys tonight. Sorry. Well, you can. It's on my website. You can see it.
Okay.
But, yeah. So we're looking. So I'm actually reading it out loud right now. So I've edited it. I read it out. My editor is not ready until June 1st. So I'm hoping like September 1st, maybe before. It's on pre-order on Amazon, so it is available now. Yeah, hope you enjoy it.
Yeah.
And then I got to do the audiobook as well, which is another whole story. That's going to take like weeks to do, because you sort of do 1 hour recording and then like 3 hours editing for the edit.
Yeah, and I'm usually not an ebook person, but now that I'm totally immersed in your world, you're bringing out the Gorky Park gal in me. I'm totally immersed in it, and if you're speaking with those accents, then I want to join you there on Audible again, most likely.
Thank you so much.
But it's beautiful that you have these books, and we're really proud of you, I have to say. And I'm sure your family, Michelle, and your sons are proud of you as well. Your friends here tonight, and NLTV, and I just think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I look forward to your next book, and I'll be watching Author Hour on mainline television. And thank you, everyone, for coming tonight.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. My name is Pam Sador, and Radnor Memorial Library. I remember, Richard, when you walked in with your young sons, and here so many years later. And I think it's wonderful. You're quite an interesting, as Grover said last night, quite an interesting individual. It's amazing what you've done.
Thank you.
And military service in the month of May in our part of the world, well, in the US, it's a big deal. So I thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay. So thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. We did record this.
Great.
So I'll see you again sometime. Thanks, everybody, for coming.